We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. Today is Saturday, and we have our regular, reoccurring character, Ed, is on the show. Now, I've had a run of guests on the show, and it's always a lot easier for me to do it when I have somebody to carry half the weight. And I think when Ed comes on here, he carries a little more than half, and I'm more than willing to let him handle that. So Ed, thanks for joining me again this week.
You bet. I just slipped into Nazareth. I'm feeling about half past dead.
Yeah, no, I get you. I get you. Um, we have to bring this up because this is kind of a momentous day. If you watch Ed on TikTok, it's at Holler Troll, HOLLERTROLL. Check him out. And what Ed does is I suggested to Ed that it was kind of the homespun stories with a point, kind of uh, a Will Rogers maybe or a Paul Harvey type of thing.
I get Paul Harvey a lot.
Yeah, I bet you do. I mean, it's a lot like Paul Harvey, and
Yeah.
why not? Because Paul Harvey was fucking awesome. But I have to say, it seems like our boy is going rogue a little bit because TikTok took one of his videos down. I said, now
It's
you're a
true.
real TikToker because somebody took your shit down.
Yeah, I ragged on the Trump children a little bit, pointing out that Trump keeps saying that immigrants are poisoning the blood of our country, and yet he chose to have four of his five kids with immigrant mothers. His
Right,
own mother was an immigrant from Scotland.
right.
His grandfather was an immigrant from Germany, Prussia, I think. But at any rate, and he keeps bad mouthing immigrants, and I wondered if it was because of the way his kids turned out.
Yeah, no shit.
So zoom, that thing was gone.
What's funny is early on when I started doing uh, the TikToks, Don Jr. had a TikTok. I don't know if he still does, but
I don't see it.
he said something absolutely stupid. He says, and and I made a comment on TikTok, and from that account, I'm not sure if it was him having the account, but it said his name and official and stuff like that. He sent me a bad comment and blocked me. So I got Don Jr. to
Typical.
block me, and I was happy about that. I felt like I did something.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Well, anytime you can get one of those guys to block you, that shows you really got it to them,
yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Now, we got a lot of shit going on, Ed. I mean,
Yeah.
when I look at all the shit going on with Donald Trump, we got this missing binder 10 inches thick with all this
Ooh,
raw
Russia,
data.
Russia, Russia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've got here the Colorado Supreme Court banning him from the ballot.
Yep.
We've got an audio tape coming out of Michigan where he and
Oh,
Ronna
yeah.
McDaniel are openly pressuring Republican canvassers to not sign the certification in 2020, and then telling them, "Hey, if you don't sign it, don't worry about it. I got a lawyer for you. I'll cover that." I mean
Yeah.
that is so
That's
implicating.
solicitation,
It is. With all that said, with all that, just those things, and that's not even half of it. If we going back to the 70s, or even the 80s, that would have destroyed somebody's career. We would have never
Oh,
heard from them
easily.
again, but not
Easily.
this time.
Nope. Well, I think about it. He mocked a disabled reporter. He said he could shoot somebody on Main Street, not lose voters. He had an affair that he paid a woman not to talk about. All of this stuff is established. He's guilty of rape. I mean, and lying about it, and besmirching the character of the woman he raped, and so many other things that would have even a hint of this would have taken him out.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
a whiff of it, any of those would have taken out any candidate. And yet, he's still here.
Donald Trump is like a
Oh,
cockroach. You can't kill him.
yes, right,
You,
exactly, and
you,
a very apt description.
yeah, I think it's pretty accurate. Now, you mentioned E. Jean Carroll. He's got
Yeah,
another trial coming up with E. Jean Carroll next month in January, and
yeah.
he recently tried to get it delayed, as he does. Tries to get
Sure.
everything delayed, and it was just absolutely ridiculous. Well, I'm trying to get everything together, trying to decide whether I'm going to go to the Supreme Court. With all the shit he's going to the Supreme Court with, the Supreme Court's got to be getting fucking sick and tired of this. They haven't had to work this hard in their lifetimes.
How can they squeeze in vacations? That's
Yeah,
what I don't know that somebody else is paying for. Yeah, and it's not just Trump. I mean, they've got another deal. They just, which was interesting. Now, I don't know if folks remember this or not, but Illinois passed a ban on assault weapons, or whatever they want to call them. They get all up in the air if you call them assault weapons, but
right,
there are AK-47s and M16s and AR-15s, that kind of thing. Also, some handguns that are
right.
automatic. There's a ban on those. It can't be sold, it can't be owned, and so forth. And NRA, or it wasn't the NRA, it was somebody like that, went to the Supreme Court and asked for a stay, so that, and well, they're going to appeal it, and in the meantime, they wanted to stay on the ban so that folks could still play with their toys and shoot people and buy and sell them. And the Supreme Court said no. Just yesterday, they said no. The ban is in force. You can bring your appeal if you want, but the ban stays in force until then. Now, I don't know if they're just trying to look even-handed, and that they will, of course, remove the ban later, or if this really points to something that could have some significant um, impact later on. I mean, they've pretty well, with removing Roe versus Wade, they pretty much, I mean, they basically sent it back to the states, right?
Right, right,
So they established once again this imprimatur of states' rights. Now they're running up against that with Texas, who's just going crazy, doing all kinds of shit with states' rights. But if they invoke states' rights once, they're going to have to do it. And if a state wants to ban something, they really shouldn't have anything to say about it under that kind of court, the way
right.
they've chosen to do it. So I could see that it is possible that there might be some cracks in the gun control question here coming up. I hope that's the case.
Well, the Supreme Court situation, they're in a tough position because they're going to make some decisions that impact this country for a long time. And over and above the gun rights thing, we have the Colorado Supreme Court taking Donald
Right.
Trump off the ballot. Now, Donald Trump says he's going to appeal it to the Supreme Court. I have some
Mm-hmm.
question as to, when he thinks about it, will he really do that? Because that's a big fucking gamble. If he goes to the Supreme Court and they listen to it and they decide with the Colorado Supreme Court, then he's done. It's over. Every state that wants to get him off will take him off, and it won't be even hard to do because he can't appeal it to the Supreme Court. And so,
Right.
either that's going to happen, or they're going to say no, he gets to stay on the ballot. And based on the argument made to the Supreme Court, I don't know how using rule of law that's the case. The other option is that they send it back to the states and say, nah, that's not our business. You deal with it. And that could seriously happen. And if that happens, then there's going to be a run on states that do this. As I've heard right now, there's like 16 states looking at taking Donald Trump off the ballot. So
Yeah.
this is going to be a big decision from the Supreme Court, and they're going to have to make it at some point in the next year, if not earlier, because people got to print ballots and shit like that. Colorado's saying they need to know by January 5th.
Exactly. Now, here's the thing. That once again would be a states' rights question, would it not?
Right.
Um,
That's what I thought.
but they might be able to have some sort of interaction with the fact that it's based on the 14th Amendment,
Right.
which is in the Constitution, which is overriding any state things. Yeah, so maybe there's some wiggle room there. I don't know. Also, which the case I think that he wants to take, one of the cases at least that he wants to take directly to the Supreme Court, is also under appeal in the not the circuit court, but
The appellate court.
the appellate court, right below the 11th Circuit, I guess
Right.
it is. So if they choose to rule on it before the Supreme Court does, then it would go to the Supreme Court, or the Supreme Court could choose to just leapfrog. I mean, it could leapfrog over, and they just let it go if the Supreme Court chooses to rule on it. The problem with the current court I see is that by far they have been willing to set aside precedent, and precedent used to be holy, in that for the court not to be seen as a partisan political entity that changes with the wind depending on which majority is ascendant, whether they're more conservatives or more liberals. They wanted to not mess with precedent once something is established. And that's why they asked all of the newbies coming in, what about Roe? What about Roe? And they all fucking lied about it.
Yeah, they
and
did.
said it's established law, or it's been there long enough that, we're not going to fuck with it. They didn't use those words. They should have. But then they get in, and either Roberts has no authority at all, or he can't exert it, which is possibly true, or they just decided, hell, we'll just throw precedent out, and we're going to go back. And you've seen it with them, with what they've done with voting rights. You've seen it with Roe v. Wade. You've seen it with a lot of things. And a lot of people, and self-concerned, are concerned that they've just thrown the baby out with the bathwater, and now they are just going to be a partisan political entity, and fuck you, unless Joe Biden or whoever expands the court. That's really the only solution I see, because they've shown no reluctance to be to take on precedent. And the big precedent they're taking on here is the right to privacy that previous courts have signed on to. That's where Roe v. Wade was originally approved. That's where contraception, that's where interracial marriage, it's all based on a right to privacy, which the originalists, also known as idiots, want to point out is not in the Constitution. It's not in the Bill of Rights. There's no right to privacy. But it's not the 14th, 12th, whatever. There is an amendment that says just because something isn't mentioned here doesn't mean you don't have that right.
Right.
So that's pretty damn clear. So if another court, a previous court, found a right to privacy, which I really believe that we all believe in to a certain extent, even the right wing believes in it when it's something they care about, guns, for example. A right to do whatever you want to do in your own home, on your own land, freedom of regulation, blah, blah, woof, woof, whatever. You can argue that stuff, but it's there.
Oh, yeah.
It was established. It was established, and it should not ever be messed with.
And the whole argument of registering your gun is based on right to privacy. And that's what I'm waiting for. If they're going to stick with this, taking away the right to privacy, well, then it's going to apply to registering guns too. And they're going to fucking scream like a stuck pig if that happens.
Well, we can see in Illinois, where we started with this idea that a state can say, we are going to regulate these weapons because they're being used to kill our citizens. We don't want them around. We want them suppressed and destroyed. They can do that. And this court is a big states' rights court. So they should not interfere with Illinois' ability to regulate what goes on inside their borders. The problem, of course, is Wisconsin is wide open. You can get your AR-15 at the 7-Eleven if you want. And so then you just go across the border, get it, come back, shoot some people. Right. So we really need a federal regulation along those lines, because quite frankly, if you got a 6-shooter, you're going to kill 6 people before somebody brains you. in most cases. Maybe you have a chance to reload and shoot 6 more. But if you've got an automatic weapon, I don't care if it's a pistol, and you can slam another magazine in there, or if it's an AR-15, you got a 30, 60 round magazine and a bump stock, or all of that accoutrements that go along with it. That's a big cry from the 6-shooter or the muskets they had when they wrote the damn law.
Let me ask you this about the Supreme Court. Now, you were saying the Supreme Court is obviously a partisan entity, which it should not
Yeah,
be. Back in
right.
history, you would have conservative, you would have liberal, and if somebody wanted to get a liberal or conservative thing through, it might be hard, but there was some negotiation and compromise. But the Supreme Court is pretty much like Congress now. You got left and you got right, and there's nothing in between. There is no negotiation. There is no compromise. So they were willing to do this and show their partisanship for all these things for Donald Trump and the Republicans over the past several years. But they are under the most scrutiny they've ever been. The courts is under the most scrutiny that it's ever been under. They're in the most danger. If they were willing to be so partisan, do you think they're willing to flip-flop and try to calm the seas, as it were, by giving some of these good judgments just to make them look like we're really not that bad? I just feel them as kind of flimsy. They'll go whatever way that's going to be best for them.
Yeah, I think they will. I think none of them want to be, they all care about history. They all care about how they're going to be seen. Because if you go back in history and you look at the Dred Scott decision, the people that made that are not held. The Supreme Court members who voted against Dred Scott in that are not held in high esteem now by most people.
No, hell no.
And the fact that there's so many bad decisions, Plessy versus Ferguson, and different ones that are not held in high esteem that were eventually overturned. But with the one having to do with slavery, we fought a war about that one, and then we had a massive civil rights over many campaign over many years that changed people's minds, or at least it seemed to have. I still think most people are fairly decent about that, but we've got a court right now that isn't. I mean, when they started screwing with the Voting Rights Act and removing sections of that, saying, "Oh well, we elected a black president, so obviously nobody's racist anymore," which
Right.
is total bullshit and should never have happened. And they continue to do that sort of thing. Why that people, normal, decent people, and there are some on both sides, in Republicans and Democrats, there are some. Why they're still there in Republican, why anybody still says I'm a Republican, I don't know, unless like Liz Cheney, they're trying to fight and reclaim the party. To me, it's unsavable. There's
Yeah.
nothing that you can do to reclaim the Republican Party after Donald Trump. They got to change the name and become something else. That's all I can see.
They really have to. The Republican Party is not redeemable at this point. The damage that's been done to the party is just so bad that the connotation of the Republican Party at some point will be akin to saying I was in the Manson family. Nobody's going to look at that positively. Now, one thing that I'm really interested in, as much as I was talking about the taking Donald Trump off the ballot, and if the Supreme Court says, yeah, we agree with it, then he's off all the ballots, or most of the ballots anyway. The other one that's more imminent and that has as much of a difficulty for Donald Trump is this claim of immunity. Okay.
Yeah.
He took it to
that's the one he wants to take to Supreme Court.
Right. He took it to the appellate court. They still haven't given an answer on it, whether they'll take it up or whatever. And so Jack Smith then jumps the appellate court and says, Supreme Court, can you give me a decision on this? Can you give it to me pretty quickly? And they said, yeah, we'll look at it. And then the appellate court says, oh yeah, well, we're going to come up with an answer. And and so and then Donald Trump comes in and says, you know, you don't have to rush this thing. We could
Yeah.
just take it fucking easy. Just take your time. And then Jack Smith says, listen, we need an immediate answer to this. There's too much on the line here for us to fuck around with this. So now the Supreme Court is being pressured to answer this question. And I don't care how corrupt the Supreme Court is. There is no way, no how the Supreme Court is going to say, yes, Donnie Trump, you have complete immunity. We're going to let you go from all this shit. That's just not going to happen. There's too much other shit that would come back up the drain if that happens.
Right. I mean, the immediate effect would be to give Joe Biden the ability to do any damn thing he wants. He could arrest Donald Trump and have his head cut off, and he's immune
Yeah.
under that sort of thing, because what they're saying is that a president is immune from any sort of prosecution, any sort of restraints. So the moment they do that, they free Joe Biden. I mean, you talk about dark Biden, I mean, he could say, you know, this court sucks. I think we're going to cancel it for a while. And I'm going to appoint new ones. I mean, there's all sorts of things. He would not do any of this. I
No.
guarantee you that. But what about the next guy? What about Trump falls dead tomorrow, and you know, when Nikki Haley gets in there and goes, "There's too many male senators. I'm going to shoot a few." Boom, boom, boom. Okay, now you guys send me some women, or I'll shoot the others. You know, what are they going to do?
Well, and the thing is not only does it make them immune while they're president, apparently Donald
Yeah,
Trump believes they're immune for life,
yeah.
for a lifetime. That he could do anything he wants, and because he was once president, he's completely immune. That's an absolutely ridiculous argument, and not even a very partisan Supreme Court can agree with that. The problem with it is once they say, no, Donnie, you're not immune, you can be tried, all this shit, that takes away about 90% of Donald Trump's defense, not only in that case, but every fucking case.
Every one of
That
them.
is devastating to him when they come back with a decision with that.
There's a part of me that believes when they do come back with that decision, and I think they might, just out of expediency, wanting to do away with all of this crap, just go ahead and say, no, you're not immune.
Right.
We've got one set of laws in this country, and it affects the president as much as it does anybody else. You can argue certain things about national security and so forth, and we'll go along with that. But when it comes down to breaking the law, starting an insurrection, trying to change the outcome of an election by putting pressure on electors and secretaries of state and so forth, which we now know he did in Michigan as well as in Georgia, and we have the tapes to prove it. We have a phone. Is it Biggs, or which one is it?
No, it
I
was
can't
Scott.
remember.
I think it was Scott Perry.
Scott Perry. We have Scott Perry's phone that now they are allowed to use, that has all of the. I think he was, you know, I know Trump was using a burner phone some, but I think Perry was also taking calls and sending
Well,
information for him to various people. I think it's a much bigger thing than we know.
the reason why Scott Perry is of interest is because Scott Perry is the person that put Jeffrey Clark in touch with Donald Trump, and he kind of
Yeah.
mediated that whole connection. And of course, we know Jeffrey Clark kind of set up the architecture for trying to overturn the election. So Scott Perry was in the middle of it. He's a disgusting, corrupt motherfucker, and he's going to go down. Scott Perry to Donald Trump and Jeffrey Clark is akin to Mark Meadows with Donald Trump and fucking everybody. I
Yeah.
mean, these guys are the middlemen, and they are culpable in their own right, but they're going to bring down a lot of fucking people around them. Those text messages, emails, whatever it is, it's revealed a lot. And that's what I've said. You know, we know a lot about all the criminality that's gone on, but when we start now hearing about a binder, about an audio recording, I don't think we've heard anywhere near how bad this shit is.
I don't think so either. Somebody teased yesterday that it was going to be Marjorie Taylor Greene's day in the barrel coming up soon too,
I've heard that
and
too.
So we know that she was involved with all of that. She was at the White House meeting. She was in various and sundry, and may have been the bomber, the one who placed the bombs at the. I've seen a couple of very convincing video examinations
I have
that they
too.
have showing how she walks and so forth. That pretty much it convinced me that she could be. I'm not going to say she is, but that she could be. She was certainly involved in other ways. Also, I'm sure that maybe Jenny Thomas shows up on Perry's phone. She certainly did on Mark Meadows. Which still I wonder why she hasn't been indicted, because that was pretty damn clear.
Well,
How
the only reason she hasn't been indicted yet is because nobody has been indicted with regards to
right
the January 6th other than Donald Trump, and they did that just
on
to keep it
purpose, yeah,
clean and get him done. But I think Jenny Thomas, without question, is involved in the upcoming indictments because I mean she was at fucking meetings in the White House. She walked into the Oval Office. She was at the Mayflower. She was kind of the straw that stirred the drink for a lot of this shit. She was fundraising. She was setting up buses. If anybody
yeah,
is involved on an upper level in that insurrection, it's fucking Jenny Thomas. She's going to
yeah.
get an indictment. I'm convinced of that.
I wonder, does that bleed over into Clarence too? And I also wonder if not some of the other Supreme Court justices weren't involved. You have to know, you have to believe, if they were looking at all different angles, they were going to go to their people who had power anywhere and try to bring them in on this. And
Well, Clarence
the
Thomas has to be involved to a certain extent.
yeah,
I mean, I've been married for 40 years and there's nothing my wife does or that I do that the other one doesn't know about, you know,
exactly,
or involved
exactly.
with. It's just, you can't tell me, oh, we just keep it separate. Bullshit.
No,
That's
no,
not
that doesn't
true. You
happen.
don't, you can't keep it separate. I mean, they'll do that to try to save Clarence Thomas, but Clarence Thomas has got so many other fucking problems. Uh, Once we get up past 2024, it'd be nice to see if we could actually impeach him if we have enough power to do that. But Jenny Thomas
Yeah.
is going to get nailed. Marjorie Taylor Greene, I've heard the same thing. There's some talk that she's next up. I don't know if that's true, but Marjorie Taylor Greene, karma hit that bitch hard. She went in,
No shit.
she was full MAGA, and then she took a flyer and decided to side with Kevin McCarthy and talk some shit. And then McCarthy bails on her. You have to wonder if McCarthy didn't resign from Congress because he didn't want to be any closer to Margie as we get closer to whatever's going to happen to her. But she's an island unto herself. Nobody likes that
Yeah,
bitch. MAGA hates
nobody.
her. Everybody
Yeah.
hates her.
This is why the Republican Party can't be redeemed. Starting, well, probably before Newt Gingrich even, but with Newt Gingrich for sure, this idea of purging anybody decent really took hold in the Republican Party.
Yeah.
And they've pretty much done that. I mean, the Paul Ryans are gone,
Right.
you know. And I was not a fan of Paul Ryan, but Kevin McCarthy couldn't tie his shoelaces. I mean, compared to the crop of people that were in there once upon a time who said, "Okay, I see where this is going. I'm done." I mean, the Freedom Caucus and now the MAGAs and all of these little cabals inside the primarily the House of Representatives, but there's some of it in the Senate too. That this idea that we don't send our, it's like Trump said about Mexico's not sending our best; they're sending us drug addicts and idiots. Well, yeah, that's pretty much the House Republican
Right.
membership.
Well,
They're not a bright group.
no, when you think about it, think about how the speakers of Republican speakers of the House went. Paul Ryan, fucking Trump humper in his own right, but had some intellectual ability and actually kind of knew how to do the job. We went from Paul Ryan to Kevin McCarthy. He's worse than Paul Ryan, without question.
Right.
We dropped down, we degraded by going to Kevin McCarthy. And now Mike Johnson, we fall in a fucking bottomless sinkhole. I mean, he is the
Uh,
worst of the worst that could possibly be Speaker of the House. And they still support this clown, even though every day some shit comes out. And I don't even think we've heard the worst of his shit.
This is a guy who thinks the world is 6,000 years old,
Right.
who believes in Noah's Ark, who thinks that everything that can possibly come up in Congress to be dealt with can be dealt with a passage from the Bible. I'm sorry, it ain't right. It ain't that way. And number one, no one who espouses that should ever be allowed anywhere near the speaker's gavel or even in government. I'm sorry.
Well, the thing
We
about,
have separation of church and state for a reason. Anybody who tries to cross that line should not be allowed to do so.
and Mike Johnson has something in common with Paul Gosar, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Do you know what that is?
They're nuts.
Well, yeah, but in the case of Paul Gosar, in the case of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Mike Johnson, their families are going, don't touch that motherfucker. He's crazy.
Yeah,
Their families don't even support them. And that should
that's
tell us
right.
something very important.
Yeah, his parents went to him and begged him to try to deal with an environmental crisis in a home state. And his response was, well, world's not going to be around much longer anymore because Jesus coming back. He told me when he told me I'm Moses.
Yeah.
I mean, this is Cracker Barrel stuff. I mean, and I'm not talking the restaurant either.
Yeah, no.
This is nut shit. And there's a whole bunch of these guys. I think 3 of them are on the Supreme Court. Quite frankly, they're Catholic, but that doesn't make them any better than the dumbest fundamentalist who ever lived. It may even make them worse because there is a Catholic underground that believes the same kind of crap.
When you look at the problems in this country, just think about this. And I may get some pushback on this, but I don't fucking care. If you look at the problems in the country, a large portion of it is because of the infiltration of religion in our government. And now we can see what happens when you bring religion into government. It just fucks things up. And it should be separate, in spite of what, Marjorie Taylor Greene or Lauren Boebert or Mike Johnson say. There's a reason. I mean, isn't that part of the reason why we got the fuck out of Britain? Because the Catholic Church was so fucking involved. And
well, no, not the Catholic, the Anglican, because they threw the Catholics out.
That's right. Yeah, you're right.
Henry VIII got rid of the Catholic Church and created his own, the Anglican Church. But the first people who came here, and this is where people get confused. The quote Pilgrims, Plymouth Rock guys, you remember them, right? The ones who created Thanksgiving when they weren't killing the Native Americans that day. These guys took over England, chopped off the head of Charles I, and ruled for several decades until people said, this really sucks. And they chased them out. That's why they wound up in Plymouth. They were the Puritans, and the Puritans wanted to, quote, purify the Anglican Church and get rid of all the Catholic influences. And, they had basically all Henry VIII did was say, we're not listening to the Pope anymore. Now we're Anglicans, but we've got the Archbishop of Canterbury who's going to be the Pope for us. And we'll still have monasteries and all that. But then along came the Puritans and they said, no, we don't want any of that. So they, there was a whole bunch of people killed and so forth. And then eventually they got thrown out, chased out, and sent over here. They eventually, they had absolutely nothing to do with the founding of this country.
Right.
Nothing.
Right.
But they were deluded eventually. And the people who founded this country, the Jeffersons, Washingtons, all of these people, they were children of the Enlightenment, and they wanted nothing to do, no religion to do with governing the country. Nothing. That's why the word God, Jesus, church does not appear in the Constitution.
Right. Well, this is why I like doing the show with Ed, because I'll ask a question. Ed will give us a very in-depth and very interesting historical bit of information. And then everybody goes, those guys are so smart. I don't have to do shit. I just have to ask the questions and sit back and listen like everybody else. No, all
The
that.
reason I know about the Puritans is I was a theater major, okay, in
Yeah.
college, along with some other stuff. But the first thing the Puritans did when they took over was close the theaters. So
Oh,
that
yeah.
that pissed me off.
Yeah.
you know, and there's always been this really rough relationship between the theater and religion, and so it always gets my back up when they try to. And that goes with book burning and banning books and so forth. And if you have to ban a book, you've already lost.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
because that just means you can't refute it. You have no basis to refute that book, so you don't want anybody to read it because you're a moron.
we kind of went through that in the 80s too. Remember when they were doing the ratings of the records? You know,
Yeah.
what was it?
Mm-hmm.
Tipper Gore.
Tipper Gore. Yeah, she was one
And,
of them.
and we had Prince, so that motherfucker was getting all kinds of ratings. Because back in
Yeah.
the day, he was talking some serious shit. Um, I was gonna get, now that you bring this up, I was gonna give you a quote that my brother said to me, and it's a quote by Stephen King, who I think I like. I don't know that he's a great writer, but he's a wonderful
He's a popular
storyteller.
writer.
He's
Yeah.
popular and he's a great storyteller. I'm not into sci-fi shit, but I'll listen to his shit all the time. But this is a quote that I think says a lot by Stephen King. He said, Fox News did to our parents what our parents were afraid video games would do to us. And
Yeah.
that makes a lot of fucking sense. They thought
Yep.
video games would turn us into killers and murderers and stealing cars and all that stuff. But that's what Fox News did. And they continue
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah. It's, I don't know. Do you remember the satanic panic in Minnesota? It was a big deal. I'm trying to think of the little
Kind of,
town.
yeah.
There was a little town south of the Twin Cities there. It'll come to me at some point where there was a daycare, and somehow or other, one of the kids made up all of this stuff that they were flown on planes and molested, and kids were killed, and
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
all of this stuff. And there was this local prosecutor, forget her name, but she blew this stuff up, and actually people went to prison from this daycare place, and there was probably one guy who may have done something with one kid or something,
Right,
but all of
right.
these other people were implicated. And at this trial, and then they brought in these psychologists to interview the kids, and they, of course, elicited stuff from these kids that never happened. That it was very easy to check out. Well, we got on a bus and we went to this place where there was a bridge over the river and this and that happened, and none of that existed. There was no bridge, there was no bus, they never went on an airplane, but yet somehow or other juries were convinced,
Right.
and people were imprisoned, and it was all because of Satan and this Satanism and the music. And then the music was, you play the music backwards and you get satanic chanting and all of this bullshit. um,
Well, the thing
and that
about,
that happened in Minnesota, for God's sake.
yeah, it did. I remember it was a big story, and I think the town you're talking about is Jordan. That's
Yeah,
where it happened,
Jordan,
and
Minnesota.
there were some people well known as the suspects in it. And what they did is that they gave it all kinds of little taglines to make it uh, interesting or catch people's interest, like this whole process of whatever abuse they claimed that was going on. They said they called it the game,
Yeah,
and that was all over the news. And yeah, it's interesting if you went through that era, uh, because of what the media did to it. You go through that town now, you think, oh, fuck Jordan. Jordan's a fucking mess. Because people don't remember that a lot of that was not true. They just
mm-hmm.
remember the big stories that came out, and they don't listen to what the actual outcome of it was. And we're seeing that all the time today. I'll tell you a story um, about the media. We're going to take a break here in a minute, but I want to bring this up because I think I talked about it before we got on. Uh,
Yeah,
I don't like the media because I don't think they're credible. They tell stories that are going to get interest and views and money, and they don't tell the whole story, or they just flat out lie. My brother sent me another story about a fellow podcaster. I'm not suggesting we're on the same level. He's king of the podcasters, Joe Rogan, I'm speaking of.
Yeah.
Guy's got a huge audience. He's getting $10 million a year from Spotify. You're listening to this podcast on Spotify right now. I'm doing it with Spotify. Ain't making $10 million. I'll tell you that right motherfucker now. But Joe Rogan went on his podcast and he was talking to this millennial who voted for Biden and now was sorry he voted for Biden. And
So he's an idiot.
so he's an idiot. And Joe goes, oh, did you hear what Joe Biden did lately? Joe Biden went up on a stage and he was saying that the Revolutionary War and the British lost because there wasn't enough airplanes. Oh my God, that fucker's losing it. And the kid goes, yeah, I can't believe he says the shit he said. And then his producer comes back and says, wait a minute, are you talking about this video? And he plays the video of Joe Biden talking about it. And he goes, yeah, see, he's fucked up. He's lost it. And then the producer played another video and he said, no, Joe Biden was talking about something that Donald Trump said. And then Donald Trump comes up on a video and he does actually say it. What Joe Biden was doing was just making fun of him. And as soon as they realize that Donald Trump is the one that said it, not Joe Biden, they go, oh, yeah, I see how he did that. He just fucked it up. I mean, that's what we have with our media. And I'm calling out Joe Rogan on that because he has an audience bigger than a lot of these fucking network channels.
Absolutely.
As much as he's just a podcast guy, he has a certain responsibility to at least try to be fucking accurate and not continually throw out conspiracy theories. The last thing I said on the TikTok was that I one time when he'd been corrected before, he goes, look, man, I'm just a dumbass podcaster. And I have to agree. Take podcasters with a grain of salt, including me. Always check their fucking work.
Yeah, this is the thing, though. We're all just dumbass podcasters to a degree,
Yeah.
but that's not an excuse, and that's not an excuse for those of you watching or listening. You've got to do what Mike said. You can follow if you want, but look it up, check on it, okay? Now, I mean, Fox News has gotten away with this for how many decades now, lying straight out, flat out, every day. All of their hosts do it. They lie, they embellish, they don't tell you the truth. But you watch them and you think they're news because it says news. Right. Well, that's a lie. Fox News is not. Watch an interview with Ted Koppel and Sean Hannity, where Koppel tells Sean Hannity, you're bad for America. Yeah. Because, and Sean Hannity goes, well, you're just not giving the American people credit for their intelligence. They know we're not news. No, they don't. The people that watch Hannity believe every word that comes out of that little shit fuck's mouth. Pardon me.
Wow. Well, with that note, I'm going to give you a chance to cool down, Ed.
Thank you.
Because I know that it's bad for your heart when you get wired up like this. Your wife sent me a note and says, don't get him so fucking wired up. He's 73 years old. He can't handle it. All right. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.